Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Slomka. Welcome to our very first sociology lesson. We are going to be talking about the intro to sociology. We're going to learn some vocab today, and we are going to just kind of acquaint ourselves with some of the tools that we're going to need to use in order to explore sociology as we go. So let's see if we can take a look what we got here. So let's begin. So introduction to sociology. Some of the things we're going to look at was we're going to look at the sociological perspective, sociological imagination, the origins of society, and some theoretical perspectives. But we'll probably save some of those maybe things for the second part of this lesson as well. We'll see how we do. Okay, so to begin with, what is sociology? So there's kind of two answers for that. There is the general answer that you might use to tell somebody about if you met them at a party, and that is just the study of human social behavior. So specifically humans, and it's just the way that they are going to be behaving socially. A little bit more advanced is, and this is something the sociologists are constantly kind of striving for, is they want it to be a scientific study of social structure and the interaction of people in a social relationships. Now, a lot of times what people want to do is when they read these kinds of things, they want to drill down deeply and they want to focus on a human or a person. But that's really not the way that sociology works. What we are doing here is we're thinking more of a larger scale. So you want to think about an entire group of people, not just one person in that group. There are other studies that focus on the person, like psychology. We're more interested in the groups. So if you take a look at our picture right here, we've got some classic 90s gang type graphics right here. We've got the Bloods and we've got the Crips. And, you know, a Bloods is a gang. You are a member of a group. And you know what? That group happens to be more important than any one member of it. So that's kind of why I've got that here. Next, what is unique about sociology? Sociology's lens of view remains at the social group level. So if you take a look at our graphic right here, you can see that the outer ring has all about society, and society does affect the self, but we're most interested in the society itself, so not so much about the self. Sociologists focus on the pattern of behavior shared by members of society. So we're more focused on trends, and we're not interested in what a single person is going to do. I'm going to try to drive that point home as much as I can with this slide. All right, the nature of sociology. Perspective is particular a point of view. So when you're talking about different sociological perspectives, you're going to be thinking about the way that they're going to be viewing their situation. So when you have any kind of issue or concern in your life, there are different ways to look at it. A lot of times on a daily basis, when you're confronted with a challenge or something, you can choose to look at that challenge in like a positive way, maybe like a every cloud has a silver lining type way, or you can choose to look at it in a negative type way. And, you know, this is just another terrible thing that has happened to me today. This is another terrible thing that's happened in my life. And so that's going to be a choice that you're going to make. And a lot of times people choose to view it one way or another. So in sociology, we have certain perspectives and certain things that each person emphasizes. And so we're going to be looking at those perspectives. And you can view a single situation from multiple perspectives and get a lot out of it. So it's important to try to view from as many perspectives as possible. A good way of thinking about that is you want to put yourself in the shoes of others so you can see what they see. We normally do not realize how much our attitudes and our beliefs are determined by our perspectives. So yes, you might think that you are very individualistic and that you have your own flag to fly and your own ideas, but a lot of times those are things that are going to come from people or ideas that you've seen before, you've been influenced by. Okay. Sociological perspectives again. So what is it? It is the ability of an individual to see the relationship between the event in their personal lives and the events in their society. So what you're going to try to do is you're always trying to bring these ideas back to you and how you are related to them. And sometimes the most interesting ones are the ones where you can just simply say, I don't know a lot about this. I don't have a lot of relationship to it. And maybe you fight to get that relationship. And what is also going to happen is that when you are trying to connect yourself to these events, you might also have to alter that. Oh, I see that like this thing that happens in my life. And then you might have to change that idea as you go because you learn and gain more knowledge. Sociologists try to find patterns. Patterns are very, very critical, and we're going to look for as many patterns as we can. And a lot of times that's going to come from some kind of data, whether that comes from interviews or surveys or information that comes from other kinds of studies. We're also going to look at factors including friends, families, gender, race, or education. The reason that these ideas are big, like friends or families or gender or race, is because these are going to be the kinds of ideas that are part of society. So you might have more specific things that kind of define you, but the idea of friends and family and gender and race or education are going to be some bigger ideas that are going to influence your decisions, and they're going to be part of society and things that are going to be interesting to sociologists. Okay, behavior. Behavior influenced by the sociological factors. So we've been talking about this. You have values, you've got people who are going to influence you. And a lot of times what this is going to basically boil down to is monkey see, monkey do. So we've got some pretty stereotypical images right here. Teenage drinking. So what we have right here is, you know, teens think it's cool to drink, and so you might want to try that out. You've got some a student right here who is vaping, and once again, that might seem like a really great idea, and so you might want to try that out. To solve these kinds of problems, a sociologist would look at the bigger societal factors, like movies. Teenage alcohol consumption is often portrayed in movies, and other places to look would be family and friends influence. Maybe you have a parent or a relative that might be an alcoholic or take part in smoking in some kind of way. And you also have American culture, which has its own values and views, and it is also dynamic. It's changing on a daily basis or I don't know, quarterly or annually basis in a way that is going to allow you to maybe view things in a different kind of light. There are things that you can say that that used to be okay and now are not okay. There are things that you can do that used to be okay that are not okay. There are things that you can do now that you could never do before. And so these kinds of things are going to change, and that's going to affect society, and then that society might affect the individual. All right, sociological imagination. Sociologists call stable patterns of social relationships social structures. So this is something that we're going to spend a lot of time on. There are a lot of social structures, and we want to make sure that we understand them very clearly. And so we're going to be looking at a lot of different social structures. You have this this little picture down here on the bottom of this cartoon. And so we have is a couple of different social structures, and we are holding up this, this idea up here at the top. So education is a very strong social structure. The nuclear family is a social structure as well. Government is a social structure. All of these things are going to be holding up some of the ideas that are going to be interesting to you or concerning to you when you are a sociologist. So if you're interested in why exactly are schools failing, it's not because of one particular teacher or one particular student. It is going to be because of some social structures that are going to be there. Let's start delving into some sociologists. So we have C. Wright Mills right here. C. Wright Mills calls the ability to see the connection between the personal problem and the social structures the sociological imagination. So we're going to make those connections, and we're going to try to use those connections in order to better understand situations and also possibly work towards bettering them or solving them. The social imagination is going to help you view your own life within a larger social and historical context. I'll be honest with you, this is the major thing. I am not a professional sociologist, but I did take a lot of sociology classes when I was in college, and they were always very enlightening to me because it really helped me kind of view my own life within the larger social and historical context. So I am one blip on the radar of a very long history within a country or within a state or within a particular subgenre like of high school teachers. And so it's important for me to kind of see where I am in there, and that kind of gives me a little bit more of a perspective. And I also think it kind of helps me be a little bit more more mellow about things, because sometimes you can see something that's happening in your life and it might just seem like, oh man, this is going to be really, really critical or important. And then you need to remember that this is also, this is one poor chapter of a very long book. On the other hand, it is important to identify those situations where, you know, it is important and you need to make sure that you stand up. You are one small part of a very long story, but if you realize that something that's happening in your small part has never happened before and might not ever happen again, it is important that you kind of seize that opportunity. We have lots of those kinds of situations happening on the news right as we speak. Okay, so now let's talk about some of the origins. So how did sociology come about? So it is a relatively new idea to study these kinds of things. I mean, it didn't come about in your life or in my life, but it is still relatively new. So the reason that this came about is a kind of a perfect storm or a little culmination of a couple of different things. Sociological imagination was born in the context of 3 modern revolutions, and these are all kind of related to each other. So we have the scientific revolution. It suggested that a science of society was possible. So once again, sociologists are always trying to make sure that it is very clear that they are scientists. And so they're going to be following the scientific method. They're going to be using those scientific methodologies to carry out their studies and be as scientific as possible with repeatable results and clear information. Then there was the democratic revolution. The democratic revolution suggested that people could intervene to improve society. So this is a little bit more of a political revolution that's going to be occurring here. And what this is going to say is that, you know, society is not just in the hands of royals, but there are actually everyday people who can step in and say what I think is valid and correct, and I think that we should change, and those changes can be put into place, and that's important. And then the last one is the Industrial Revolution. This is the one that I think is the most interesting to me. I spent the most time studying this one. Industrial Revolution really ramped up things in kind of a very, very fast way. It presented social thinkers with a host of pressing social problems crying out for solution. So this is the major one, because I don't know about you, the times when I learn the most or I am the most proactive is then when there is a situation that I have a problem and that problem needs to be solved quickly. A lot of times in my life, those problems are problems that with broken things that are in my house or in my garage, and I need to fix those right away. So I have to do a lot of learning. The same thing is happening here with the Industrial Revolution. What people could do is they could see at their job or see in the places where they lived in their neighborhoods, they could see problems right in front of their faces. And they may be too big for one person to solve, but it just seemed like with so many people living together and working together in these new things called cities, that they could possibly solve some of these problems if they organized and worked well together. But they needed to have a bit of a strategy, and that's where sociology could really pay off. They could solve some of these problems. Okay, so now sociology, much like some of those revolutions that we just saw, really has its origins in Europe. And it's not necessarily because, you know, Europe is better or America is worse. It was just, you know, these things happened a long time ago, and the European culture was a little bit more established at that time. So we have Comte right here, Auguste Comte. He believed to have coined the term sociology. So this is an interesting thing. So sociology in general is a science where people are coming up with terms all the time. So it is kind of important and kind of fun to know the first person who came up with the term sociology, because if you look in any kind of sociology published articles or anything like that, almost everyone will have some kind of term that they come up with or some kind of phrase, and then you're supposed to use that phrase in order to describe kind of their body of thought. So knowing Comte came up with the term is kind of an important one. It's a little throwback to the OG. He aimed to create a science of society. So once again, they've been trying to do this for a long time, and they are always kind of pushing towards this. They want it to be as scientific as possible. These are not people who are just simply sitting in their armchairs thinking about it. They are out there in the trenches collecting the data and trying to find the trends. Society should be studied in the same scientific manner as nature. So Comey was watching people like Charles Darwin out there studying nature, and he wanted to bring those same kinds of ideas to society. Didn't have to travel far and wide to find some kind of rare bird in a forest. You could focus on the society that surrounded you each day and dive as deeply as possible. Next, Durkheim. Emile Durkheim right here. So he considered the father of sociology. So even though Comey coined the term, Durkheim really took that idea and ran with it. And so he was very interested in sociology, and he spent a lot of time studying it. Demonstrated the merits of applying empirical research to the study of social life in his suicide studies. So suicide was a very, very interesting thing early on. And one of the great things about it is that there was a lot of data about suicide that was collected. Durkheim didn't necessarily have to collect his own data because hospitals or police or other kinds of social networks would collect that data for him, and then he could just simply analyze it, which meant that his data was accurate and didn't have to be verified in any kind of way, and he could get it easily and quickly, and he could just simply focus on coming up with those solutions to the problem, or just better understanding the problem so that they could come up, somebody else might be able to come up with the solutions. So that was a good place to start. Next, Karl Marx. Karl Marx right here, very popular figure, a major figure in the political philosophy. So he is a sociologist, but that is not his only kind of hat that he wears. Karl Marx is also known as the father of the communist thought process. Believed the chief problem facing modern society is the struggle for individuals. Okay, so individualism is important and held on to very, very tightly, especially by people here in the United States of America. It's important to be an individual, have your own individual thoughts, and have your own individual freedoms. And Karl Marx thought that he kind of took that in the opposite direction and moved towards a more community-based idea or ideology, which is why it's called communism. Emphasize the formative influence of economics on the social life. So communism and his thought process right there, there's a large emphasis on economics. And so that is just something that Karl Marx focused on a lot, and he saw the connections between there. A lot of people, there's lots of phrases about this, money cannot buy happiness, more money, more problems. Lots of different kinds of phrases are going to connect the way that people feel or the way that a society works with the kind of economics that they are experiencing. Next one, Weber. So Max Weber right here was concerned with the increasing rationalization of modern Western society. And so what he's looking at people who are using their rational thought process right here, and they're thinking about things not in mystical ways. If the moon passes in front of the sun and it's an eclipse, this is not necessarily some sort of crazy miracle that has occurred, but rather something that can be explained and that there probably is a solution to. Even if you can't necessarily find that solution right away, you can at least identify the fact that it is in fact possible. Weber was interested in how behavior can come to be increasingly goal-oriented rather than value-oriented. So now this man existed a long time ago. He lived between 1863 and 1920. But if you look at those phrases, goal-oriented versus value-oriented, those are things that still ring true today. There are plenty of people out there. There's plenty of media out there that really plays up this idea of, hit your goals. Detroit hustles harder. Put on your big boy pants or put on your big girl pants and get to work. Those are things like that are very, very goal oriented. And there's also a diminished view of values. You want to get that money by any means necessary. It doesn't necessarily matter if you did it in a way that helped others or whether it hurt others. And so that is something that people have been interested in and that people have been emphasizing for a very, very long time. It's not a single person who does that. That's a view of society. So that is why Weber was so interested in it. And our last one, Harriet Martin. She was an early feminist, and she engaged in some of the earliest recorded sociological research. So what she did is something that was a little bit interesting and different, is that she once again went out and she hit the streets and she was gathering the data. So we had talked earlier about Durkheim and how he had been studying suicide, and he didn't necessarily have to gather his own data, but Harriet here, Martineau had to gather her own data, and so she was out there collecting that information and making determinations and finding trends that had to do with sociology. She addressed the issues related to sociological methodology. So this is an important thing. For the very last time in this lesson, I'm going to talk about how sociology was trying very hard and is always trying very hard to make sure that it is seen as a science. So there's methodology that needs to be followed. There are ethics. There are things that need to happen in order to make sure that your results are repeatable and not just a one-time strange event that occurred and cannot never be repeated again. So that is some clear work. Okay, so we're going to spend some more time talking about these people in a little bit more depth, but I wanted to make sure that you got this information just down so you had some of the general things, and then we will dive in a little bit more deeply together.